Okay. Hi and welcome everyone to this week of workgroup component standard. Today is the 12th of February, and let's look at the agenda, what we have today. I guess it's going to be mostly check what the status is for different PRs, and the K-flag. K-flag cap is going to be the main topics, I think.
Sure. Let's go through those PRs quick, and then we can talk about the flag library.
Yes. By the way, I see that the meeting notes right now, they have the wrong permissions. Now,
should we give edit to the whole? Yeah,
yes,
we should.
yes. Now we have. Now it should work. I'll accept these changes to the agenda here. Well, yeah, that was our bad, I guess. Let's manage that doc. But yeah, now you all should have edit permission and add something to the agenda.
So it was on component standard had edit, but Kubernetes dev did not.
All right. Yeah. Well, now fixed. So yeah, first off, PR 2788.3. I need to get back at this, but it's pretty basic in what it does. Creates a serializer package for component configs. So we can have this one way of saying I want to decode a config, and that's using the things we want, like strict serializer, using a strict unmarshaller and stuff like that. And eventually it also can handle multiple kinds in the same file or in different files or these things. So that's one. Then we're moving some packages like restructuring, and Marek has been working on moving the flag packages. So I think this is going to should be ready to merge in like 1 or 2 days. So that's great.
Yeah, we probably want to, with the flag one, this move is fine, but FYI, if we do something like K-flag, it might get absorbed by that.
Yes. I think exactly with regards to K-flag, I was thinking that we would exactly do it like this. So we break it out from the main repo, and then either we put K-flag in component base, probably, or we break it out to its own repository. Like, we can talk about fork versus non-fork later, but anyway.
Let's start with component base.
Yeah.
I don't want to be crazy with that stuff yet, and that's also a good spot to experiment with things.
Yes. So a prototyping area for.
Stefan had some other thoughts on where to put it. I'm trying to find his comment.
Yeah, but anyway, I just mentioned to move it to experimental. As long as we don't know how it's really finally looking like and where it should end up.
Yeah.
That's
experimental CLI K-flag. Yeah.
That's okay by me. But anyway, this moves the existing flag sync we have into component base, and that's the first step basically we need to take. So these three, and the third one, which is 72.77.8, is also on my table, which is basically adding testing to all the component configs. So this is dependent on the first serializer package. So I'll try to get that done first in the coming week. But yeah, then came flag, and also, yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so the motivation for K-Flag and the link to the KEP and also an example PR with like a partial, very partial implementation, just to give some guidance on what it might look like. The motivation for this is that in order to adopt component config, what you typically have to do is maintain a mapping of your legacy flags that people were using to configure your runtime onto that configuration so that you don't break backwards compatibility. And as part of this, you also have to ensure that flags take precedence over any config loaded from file so that you do not, again, break compatibility. So we did this in the kubelet, and there were all kinds of sort of tricky edge cases we ran into implementing this kind of thing. And that's all linked in that version component configuration files doc, which is linked at the top of the KEP. And so this KEP kind of has two goals. One is to make it much easier to implement that flag precedence handling. The other one is that there's another common flag-related case, which is that lots of third-party libraries also register flags. They tend to register them globally, which means they link into your command line API whether you want them or not. You can get around that by explicitly constructing your own flag set, being very careful not to include the global flag sets in it and only parsing that. And it's useful to have some helpers if you do want those global flags, to be able to explicitly pull them in to that flag set one by one. So those are kind of the two goals, initial goals of this K-Flag KEP. There's a lot of goals that we have probably in this group that I don't want to include in this KEP that are potentially still flag related. So there's a whole list of those in the KEP. For example, there are some things with Cobra. For example, if you rely on it to generate your help text, it will still leak the global flags into like the default usage and help text because it pulls in those global flag sets when you ask it to generate those things, whether you want to do it or not. So that's a problem that we'll have to deal with at some point, but that's not a goal in this KEP. We're not really focused on like how your configuration structs should be laid out, how configuration types should be composed with each other. We might write a future KEP for this, but this KEP is a lot more about making it easier to like register your flags and parse them and then eventually apply them to some arbitrary config structure, regardless of what that structure looks like, in a less complicated way than happens today. And there's a few other ones in here, like we're not trying to deal with loading or parsing config files. We're not really concerned with dynamic config in this KEP, and we're not really concerned with any sort of validation. This is just to clean up that Bootstrap workflow of registering your flags, making sure that you only have to parse them once. The kubelet has to parse them multiple times right now to implement flag precedence, and then making it easy to apply them to arbitrary structures. So this has been up for a couple weeks. People have probably had a chance to look through it. And I kind of just want to open up for any comments today and see if we can move forward with this. I don't know if anyone has anything.
I have just one comment. I think I voted in GitHub as well as already. We should start to port one of the components to this framework. And I think this would clear a lot of things up and make sure that we really build the right thing.
Yes, I think what I'd like to do is implement this and in experimental and then port maybe something like kubeproxy to it. Something simple. Yeah. I'm not really too interested in putting kubelet to it.
I think we can start merging it into experimental, even in the current state, and then make a PR maybe against kubeproxy or kubescheduler or something, and just leave that open as an example.
Yeah.
Until we are ready and confident it's the right thing.
Okay, that seems reasonable to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So with regards to and another goal that ties into this is like now we have this separate global flag. We have flag packages. We have whatever. Like with Kflag, we could actually wrap them all into one package, so we don't have to have like I don't know. We have some string maps and custom type.
Yeah, we can just include
Yeah.
those implementations in Kflag. Like it's pretty trivial to add those types.
Yes. So that is also an added benefit. But what are like folks' thoughts about forking versus just like sugar on top?
I personally don't really want to fork pflag. I think that's a lot of work, and I don't really see a significant benefit to it versus just writing a thin wrapper on top of it.
Yeah, I concur. Wrapping and type aliasing. If we need type aliases and stuff for your access.
Right. Yeah. That totally makes sense.
And we can always revisit that decision later once we establish.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I just wanted to make sure we asked the question. So, with regards to process, should we like go ahead and merge the KEP as is, or like approve whatever stuff? So
I'm happy with the KEP as is. If people want to merge it,
I'll take a final look and give the approve /LGTM.
yeah,
already.
I'll make a note on it as well about starting an experimental in the comments.
Right. So there we go. Yeah, and the next thing, or like things that are on our radar. Yeah, I was also linking this KEP, this in-flight. So I found two more in-flight PRs. 7280 is the one that is a local to every controller thing that we've been discussing sometime for the Kube controller manager. And I'm not totally sure where to go with that. But I'm pretty sure that whatever, or like after we've decided what to do, Stuart UI will help make that happen. But for now, it's just stalled. For example, what would be the most important thing for 1.14 would be, as I said in other threads, would be to make the KCM config serializable, like overall. So then we can start getting feedback and gradually evolving the thing. And
okay, so this is just to give each controller its own config?
It's the first thing here is moving it to the right locations. But people had opinions there with regards to co-locating. So that people basically said it's unnecessarily complex to put one. So we want every controller to have its own kind, and now with this, they would also have their own director, which is like package / controller / CSR whatever / config would host the CSR controller configurations. But that has kind of stalled. So my immediate next step as this stalled would maybe be to go ahead and ditch that for the moment, because it's just a package rename, and then instead make the kind serializable by adding type meta to them and making the controller manager start working towards making the controller manager able to load config files.
So one thing that came up a few weeks ago was the question of how we'll eventually make these configurations sort of composable. And I think the main question there was like, we're combining all these controllers into one binary. Like, do you really want to type out the client information for every single controller you want to enable in that versus being able to provide it once? And so there's probably an in-between step here after like splitting these all out, where we want to like come up with some common schema. Maybe it's like another common header that we include in the types that includes that sort of critical information, such that it's, and maybe an interface that wraps the structs or something internally so that it's easy to apply that client information like across all the configs or derive it separately. Sally, I don't know if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, I'd be interested in Sally's thoughts with regards to Kube Builder and stuff.
Yeah, I've thought about this a little bit before. I think that sounds like a decent option. The other option is basically whatever gives you your parse config also lets you obtain a handle to other common bits of the config, right? So like, instead of like whatever interface we provide that lets you say parse my config and return me populated config struct also provides you a handle to return me populated rest config or something like that.
Yeah, that might help. I think the main thing is like you have 20 controllers, right? And they all need the same rest config. Like,
yeah,
do I just specify it on one? Do I have to specify it on all of them?
I think when you use like, I would say you have some sort of common config that when you declare that you're using like the component config, you have a common config section that declares stuff like
like a
that declares stuff like config, and that
or something.
Yeah, and then that gets deserialized separately, kind of behind the scenes, and then all the other controllers that are currently being managed by this controller manager also get to register their own specific config, and when they do that, they can also pull back the common config.
And if we're comfortable saying all controllers need to be compatible with some sort of controller host that does that for them, that might be okay. There's the question of like, if you want to split controllers out.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the approach we take in controller runtime and Kube Builder, we have this idea of of like every controller is managed by a controller manager. You can have multiple controllers running under the same controller manager. And a controller manager is the thing that's responsible for doing all this stuff, like setting up shared informers, setting up clients, populating discovery information, stuff like that. And then, thank you. And then controllers just say, I'm being run by a manager, and the manager provides them a way to get a handle to all of that.
That makes sense to me as a way to go. So just a generic controller manager config. Handle those things.
Yeah. So basically, what I think it practically would look like the serialized types would be that we have kube controller manager configuration, which has this like whatever generic things like where to serve and like what controllers to run and all rest config, the generic one. So that's one kind. And then we have one kind per controller in the external types. And in the internal types, it looks exactly the same, but the main controller manager struct has also, as fields, like they have now, fields, all the controllers. So we have just one config object we can reference as before, exactly as before, but that's just pulled together when merging into internal. Does that make sense?
Is having them unified into one on the internal object just to make it easier to gradually refactor
Yes.
from what we have right now? Okay, cool.
Because yeah, that's what we have right now. So I was thinking like making the first step, keep the internal config as is, but split it in external and merge it as at like load time.
Yeah, I think in the long term we probably want to just have it be separate in the long run. But yeah, it makes sense to make it easier to refactor in the meantime.
Yep. Okay. I'll talk with Stuart about this. He's in China, so unfortunately he can't attend these meetings. But I'll proxy that.
Sorry, Lucas. Fabrizio speaking. What will be the user experience for using the component config for the controller manager? The user has to provide one file with all the kind or many files?
Yes, there's many options. So you can either, there will be one file with different YAML documents or many files that you specify, or a directory and then like JSON and YAML glob will just match all the things. So you have like 3 options.
I think the idea is to support all 3 of those options.
Yes. And that will be built into the serializer package that I'm writing. So you just do like I have this string source. And that string source then determines is this like a comma separated list of files, or is it one file, or is it a directory, then reads the stuff, and then when it reads it, it splits YAML documents and does all this. So
okay, I'm just thinking about kubeadmin.
Yeah.
And in kubeadmin, we are already asking user to put a set of objects in one file. And that means that for the Kube controller manager, we are not going to ask to add only one object, but many objects.
Yes,
one for each
many kinds, but in whatever of these 3 ways to specify them. One file or many files or a directory.
Like you can choose the layout that works best for you, and then you hand, whatever controller manager or whatever it is, a list of paths, maybe to files, maybe to directories that contain files, and it just slurps it all up and figures out, where the leaves of that tree are.
Yes, and as soon as we have this serializer package in component base, we'll start using that in kubeadmin, because it's most of the code that I'm writing here is just a generic way of exactly the same code I've written there. So
yes, no, I got the concept. It's just that currently kubeadmin manages one object for each component. So one for kubelet, one kind for kubelet, one kind for kubeproxy.
yeah, right.
And now we have to make this more generic, because for kube controlling manager we have to manage more kinds.
Yes. But
Yes.
I think that will definitely be solved. I don't think it's going to be too hard to make that happen. But yes, indeed. Now we unfortunately have to end the meeting, because we're 1 minute before 7, and the cost lifecycle meeting, which is right after this, is at 7. So thanks everybody for attending, and see you all next week.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Feel free to leave comments, any thoughts or discussion in the meeting notes. You should all have edit access now.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.